Hey everyone, and welcome to Titanic. Today we're doing something a bit different from our normal Let's Plays. We are going to do something both exciting and terrifying. We are going to experience the sinking of Titanic as a first-class passenger. We are going to play the game Titanic Fall of a Legend. It simulates the sinking of Titanic quite accurately. It's not as detailed in terms of models as, Titanic Honor and Glory is. But it's still quite realistic. We're going to select new game, and we're going to do the first person sinking experience. In this mode, you can experience what it was like on Titanic when it sank in first person. The simulation goes for approximately 30 minutes, so this is an important bit. The sinking in this simulation is somewhat sped up. In key moments, it's sort of real time. But the very gradual sinking of the bow deeper down, all that, the ship sort of tilting forward, all of that is sped up. So the entire process will take around 30 minutes. We're going to play this level, select play, and there we are. We are on the boat deck, or first class area of the boat deck, right forward of the ship. We're on the starboard side, that way is forward. Now, we are a first-class passenger. We are not allowed past this point right here. Everything forward of here is for the officers, right? That point right there, you can see the right bridge wing. You can see the stairway leading down towards the, A deck promenade and the B deck eventually. So, this bit right here is where first-class space begins. And here we have the entrance to the first class. Oh dear, a bell. I don't know what that is because I am a simple first class passenger strolling around a little. This bit right here is where the first class promenade ends. And right here you have the smokers, or no, it's not smokers, the engineers promenade. And behind there is second class. So this bit right from here all the way up to the fence right here is the first class space. Now we also have this bit right here with the compass tower, and of course we have the first class lounge, or I keep mixing up parts of the ship. This is of course the grand stairway, one of two actually. Titanic had two almost identical grand staircases. One of them was further aft. This is the forward one leading down. We all know this one from the 1997 movie. Hang on, let's go outside. So it's a very cold night. It's a very still night. The sea was as smooth as glass. This is probably an exaggeration of how wavy it was. Oh dear, what's that? Oh goodness. So this is the first sign that a first-class passenger might have gotten that anything was amiss. A giant berg of ice, a mountain of ice, drifting by the hull. Some of the passengers heard a crash, some of them felt a shudder, others didn't feel anything at all. Some passengers didn't even notice the iceberg hitting, even though they were awake. It very much depended on where you were on the ship. So we just noticed scraping past an iceberg. But we're not too worried. Crew doesn't seem to be all that, worried. So we're just going about our business. Now, it's going to take a while before anything happens now. So we're just going to take a moment to talk about lifeboats. Because being on the boat deck, waiting for the boats to be put in action, we're going to talk about lifeboats. Because there are a lot of misconceptions about how lifeboats were viewed, how they were used. We all know that Titanic famously didn't have enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Titanic had 20 lifeboats. There are 4 on this side right here. Actually, there are... let's get a look. Right, those forward ones there, those are 2 lifeboats. One is swung outboard. That's the cutter that's ready for emergency use. And let's jump on here. So you can see one being swung out, and there's another one inside the Davids right there. Davids, however you want to pronounce it. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and then further aft we have another 4. So that's 9 either side. So that's 18 in total, with 2 more collapsibles. Actually, the two forwardmost ones are collapsibles as well, the ones in between the davits. So 20 lifeboats all told. Now, that was not nearly enough for all passengers. And, you know, Titanic has had a lot of criticism, or the builders or the owners have faced a lot of criticism for not having enough lifeboats. But lifeboats were not all that simple to use. Lifeboats were not a magical solution to safety at sea. For instance, if you look at these lifeboats right here, they are quite big. They were really big. They could hold around 65 passengers all told. But they're not massive. And very importantly, they are open. They are not enclosed. They are not the modern sort of polymer, sort of epoxy, hard-shelled, enclosed lifeboats we have today. You know, the orange tubes you always see on cruise ships and freighters. These are wooden, open-top boats that are, you know, compared to the Atlantic, tiny, absolutely tiny. These boats are only useful in a very moderate sea. If any sort of breeze or storm picks up, then you are extremely vulnerable in these boats. Being in an open boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in April no less, when it's very cold, is not a pleasant experience. It's very much gambling with your life. You know, you would only get inside a lifeboat if your life absolutely depended on it. So that sort of explains why many people, when Titanic hit the iceberg and wasn't really visibly sinking all that much, at least in the eyes of the passengers, and the officers were telling them to start getting into lifeboats, a lot of the people on board didn't want to board a lifeboat. It wasn't that they didn't think it wasn't serious. I mean, some people thought it may be serious, some people thought they might be a bit at risk, but you'd have to be awfully sure that the ship was sinking if you wanted to get into a lifeboat, because you're essentially gambling your own life, you know, getting aboard one of these relatively small wooden lifeboats. So it's not very surprising. Look at that. Did you hear that? That was the first alarm rocket being sent off. We just missed it, but there was a white rocket being sent off. So getting inside a lifeboat was quite a risk. So that explains why many people didn't want to, at first, to board lifeboats, because they didn't feel there was a risk as such. And the greatest risk was to board a lifeboat. And in extent of these lifeboats being quite vulnerable, all told, that sort of explains the design philosophy at the time. Because the design philosophy was to make Titanic itself as unsinkable as we can make her. That was the exact quote. The wharf, the builders, the owners never stated that Titanic was in fact unsinkable. What they said is, we made her as unsinkable as we can, as it is humanly possible. Now, they did that because they knew what a terrible risk lifeboats were. Look at that. The first lifeboat is being swung out right in front of our own noses. So this is lifeboat number 1, 2, 3, 4. This is number 4, if I'm correct. No, hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is number 7, I think. Yeah, it says so on the boat itself. This is 7. So it's being swung out. But we're not boarding that lifeboat yet, because there are plenty of lifeboats left. So we're not in any sort of danger here, are we? The ship is still very steady. There's no sort of list or forward tilt. We're just going to stay on board. So these lifeboats, 20 of them, how is that going to be enough for everyone on board? Well, it was never intended to be enough. The ship was never intended to sink. All the effort that could have gone into making sure more lifeboats were on board was put into making the ship as unsinkable as possible. There is another problem with lifeboats, and that is that the 20 lifeboats that were on board Titanic were enough for about 1/3 of all her passengers. That means that in order to accommodate all passengers in lifeboats, you would need 60 lifeboats. Now with 20 lifeboats, the decks are already quite crowded. Imagine having to stow 3 times as many lifeboats just on this side of the ship and again on the other side. We'd have 60 lifeboats all told. But there is an additional problem. 60 lifeboats is enough, assuming that the ship is going down on an even keel. that it doesn't swing to one side, that it doesn't capsize. But ships very often didn't sink on an even keel. Titanic very famously did, but she was quite rare in that. Most ships sort of, they capsized as they sank. Which means that there's a little bit of a list on Titanic as we speak. She listed a little bit to port side. So imagine that the list was exaggerated, right? This side of the ship would tilt upwards and that side would tilt downwards. That would mean that if you were to launch a lifeboat from this side, it would hit the outside of the ship. And it would be at risk of rolling around, of spilling all its passengers into the sea. That's actually what happened with Lusitania. When Lusitania sank in, 1914 it was? I think it was 1914. Might have been 15. I'm not sure, I need to look that up. But around that time, Lusitania was torpedoed by a U-boat and sank quite quickly and listed very heavily as she did so. Lots of lifeboats were unable to be launched properly because of the severe list. So you can only launch lifeboats at the low end of the ship, so at that side. That would mean that in order for all passengers to be accommodated, you'd have to have twice as many lifeboats as you'd normally need in order to compensate for the very likely scenario that one side of the ship is going to be unable to launch lifeboats because lifeboats would simply hit the side of the ship. Right, as we've been talking, this lifeboat has been launched. This was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. This one is gone, this one is gone, and this one is gone as well. We've gone forward of the little gate now. We're on the officers' quarters, or promenade. But that's okay, because by now they were loading passengers into the lifeboats. We're quite reasonably allowed to be here. So I can see 1, 2, 3 lifeboats already gone. Another one leaving right down there. I don't want to fall down because I can actually fall down. But nothing is really happening as of yet. There's not really a noticeable list. We're still listing a bit to starboard, or to port, but that's alright. Shall we go and have a look at the other side? We're going to move through the first class staircase and towards this side. You can see the list is quite noticeable now, but it's probably not going to go any further than this. I can see 1, 2... Is that one? No, that's the reflection of that star. 1, 2, 3, 4 lifeboats launched. Now, we do seem to go down a little bit by the head, but let's take a look. Yeah, we're fine. See? We're absolutely fine. The ship is in no danger of sinking. The officers at this point are, quite organised. The crew is quite organised. There is a little bit of a frantic workload. They are trying to hurry, but there is no panic. Most of third-class passengers are still down below at this point, and the promenade is filled with first-class passengers, determining whether they ought to leave the ship or not. So we go back to this side, right here. Yeah, we are definitely leaning forward a bit now, but it's not very noticeable. There goes another rocket. There it goes. So yes, lifeboats on Titanic is a very complicated subject. It was quite undoable, quite just unrealistic to provide enough lifeboats for everyone on board. They would have to have 120 lifeboats in order to account for all eventualities. And, the eventuality of a ship listing as it sinks was not very unlikely. It was very likely for a ship to list or capsize even as it went down. So the scenario of having to have all lifeboats on one side, having to have 60 lifeboats on one side, was a very realistic one. The list is growing a little bit severe now. Although looking like this, the forward list is not that bad. We seem to be trimmed quite evenly still. I think we're alright. At this point, the lifeboats further aft were being prepared. Look at this. Perfect timing. This lifeboat is being prepared. This is number 9. So this is number 11. So this is 9. That's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, with the 4 collapsibles at the front. But, oh dear, looking from here, if you start looking forward, you can see that we're actually looking at the sea now. We're not looking at the horizon. It may be quite difficult to see, but shall we go back forward? Because it does seem like the ship is getting quite a forward tilt to it. Let's take a look. Oh dear, look at that. Oh dear. That does not look good. Maybe the situation is more dangerous than we realized. Oh, let's get back up here. This is quite severe. You know, I think we ought to leave the ship. I left some of my belongings in my cabin. We're just going to grab them real quick. Just down here. We're on B deck. So let's pretend like this is our cabin right here. We go inside. This is all first class space. And let's get our belongings. We've grabbed our belongings, put on a thick woolen coat, and we are going back up on deck and see if we can find a lifeboat. There we go. Because the list is growing quite severe. There is a lifeboat still right there. Shall we try and take that one? Oh dear, it's the last one being launched. Yeah, we definitely need to catch that one. Do we jump inside? There we go. We are abandoning ship right now. You can see the iceberg in the distance right there. Okay, so we are safe. We are in a lifeboat. We're alright. But let's see what happens. All of these lifeboats have just been launched. And we are ready to pull away from the ship. You know, looking from here, it looks far worse. Can you see that in front? That's the... Hang on. That's the promenade. That's almost touching the water right there. There was another flare going off right there. We are very slowly moving away. You can see portholes here being submerged already. I think we left just in time. This was probably the last lifeboat to leave. We are making a bit of speed now. Moving away from the ship. Now, I want you guys to do something else. Obviously, we all know what's going to happen to Titanic. You know, I as a passenger don't know, but we all know. There were a lot of conflicting reports about what happened to Titanic when she sank. Did she split up? Did she break? Or not? Now, nowadays, it's very difficult for us to imagine people not noticing how Titanic broke apart, right? We've all seen the movie. We all know how violent it was and how obviously she was destroyed before our very eyes. But actually being there was quite different. Do you see? Can you see the funnels? Try and distinguish the funnels. You can't, can you? You can only see black spots against the horizon, against stars. You can't actually see the orange of the funnels, because you couldn't in real life. Nights at sea are very, very, very dark. And the moment the lights are going out, and the lights did go out just before she broke apart, probably because she broke apart, probably because steam conduits were being ripped apart. steam pipes, the dynamos and generators were cut off from their power supply, and all the electric wiring sort of was broken apart. So the entire ship sort of went into a blackout just before she broke up. Now, you can clearly see her now, but imagine the lights going out. So do that for me. Pay attention to the ship, what she looks like, and whether you can actually see her breaking apart. So, we are clustered. There are 4 lifeboats right here. There is another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up front there. And as we're watching, she seems to be very still in the water. Although the bridge is going down right now. Very possibly you can just make out the greenish light on the starboard bridge wing, just about touching the water now. Just where the row of lights ends all the way forward. Looking at the stern and sort of gauging by the stars, the stern is not rising all that much. She seems to be quite still in the water. And many people at this point actually still had hope that she wouldn't sink. Because at this point she didn't seem to be sinking all that much. But, as we know, she is going to sink. And quite soon things are going to speed up. Up until this point, the sinking had been very gradual. And at some point it even seemed to stop. Like she had attained equilibrium. Like she would be able to stay afloat, even when half submerged, where the intact watertight compartments would be able to keep her afloat. So people were still kind of hopeful, but right about now, that hope sort of flew away. You can see that the bridge wing is now submerged. You can hear the ship groaning. And right about now, a massive wave of third-class passengers stormed up on deck. They were still down below by the time the lifeboats were leaving, and right about now they found their way up to the deck. I'm not going to go into whether they were kept below deck, whether they were intentionally kept away, locked away. You know, the movie sort of gives the impression that third-class passengers were actually locked away like animals. It's more complicated than that, but we're not going into there now, into that. Suffice to say that right around now, the first funnel went. Did you see that? I bet that was really difficult to see. The first funnel just fell over. But yeah, the deck at this point would be filled with third-class passengers scrambling for a place in a lifeboat that had, already left. Right about now, they would be launching the forward collapsibles. They would float them off the deck, which is another thing, the lifeboats. Again, lifeboats. 20 of them. People say Titanic needed more lifeboats, but they just managed to launch all the boats they did have. They had to float off the last collapsibles from the deck as it sank from beneath their feet. You know these scenes from the movie. You know how they scrambled to launch those last 2 collapsibles. If they had had any more lifeboats, they would not have had time to launch them. They would have gone down with the ship. Possibly they could have been cut away, possibly they would have been able to float off, but it would have made very little difference. At this point, the ship is sinking, and having had more lifeboats, obviously the chances are that a few more people would have been saved. But simply saying Titanic needed more lifeboats and then everything would have been fine, that's somewhat naive to say. They just managed to launch the ones they had. Right. The sinking is still a bit slow, although you can see the stern rising ever so slowly. And this must have been quite, you know, quite harrowing for people in the lifeboats, because I want to jump overboard and I want to go see what's happening right there, but you can't. You are trapped in this tiny little lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic, watching your great magnificent ship slowly sink beneath the waves. It must have felt quite powerless, quite, you know, futile to be here and watch this magnificent, majestic ship sink before your eyes. Actually not knowing whether she's going to be alright. Right about now, the stern is really starting to come up. It may be very difficult to see, but you can just see the propeller, the central one, coming above the water now, coming up. You can see the rudder. You see that bright star just behind it, sort of disappears behind the rudder now. That was another funnel going. That was funnel number 2. And she is definite. Look at that. She is going. She is going down. She's moving upwards. Now the lights are going to go out. And see if you can see her breaking up. There she goes. The sounds are harrowing. It must have sounded absolutely terrifying. Titanic going down like this. I am very curious what you guys will be able to see from our position right here. The stern is rising now. Just going to look at it. The slightly bright area you can see is the propeller shaft protruding from the hull. And the stern is pointing almost entirely upwards now, and she's slowly sinking. She's going down. The propellers are nearly at the waterline now. The water. And there she goes. You can see the white of her stern slowly moving down. And gone. Titanic is now gone. She has sunk beneath the waves, and all that's left are 20 lifeboats, one of which is actually upturned, has capsized. Well, not actually capsized. It fell over as they tried to launch it on deck, and it was just floated off upside down. So there is nothing for us to do but wait for rescue, which would arrive in several hours. RMS Carpathia. Was it actually RMS Carpathia? I know it was Carpathia. Was it SS Carpathia? I'm not sure if she was a Royal Mail ship. I'd have to look into that. I'm not an expert on Carpathia. But all we have to do now is to wait for her. So, that was the sinking of Titanic from the perspective of a first-class passenger. Next time, because this was the first part in a series of from the perspective ofs, next time we're going to experience the sinking of Titanic from the perspective of a third-class passenger and see what kind of chance someone like that would have had to escape the sinking of Titanic. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this has been somewhat educational, somewhat entertaining. I hope you guys liked it. If so, please let me know. If not, don't let me know. Or do let me know. Let me know what you would have liked to see. Let me know if you thought I was talking too much, talking too little, if the lighting was good. I did purposely dim the brightness a little bit so as to replicate what it would have looked like for Titanic to sink in the pitch black. But let me know what you thought, and I'll see you next time.